Update. We appreciate it. Let's dig a little bit deeper right now about the stakes for the U.S. and Russia. Nile Gardiner, director of the Margaret Thatcher Center for Freedom at the Heritage Foundation. Good to see you today, Nile. And I wonder, I certainly remember George W. Bush, when I was covering him, saying he looked into the eyes of Vladimir Putin, saw into his soul. He was mocked for that later. President Obama talked about if he got reelected, he'd have more flexibility to work with Vladimir Putin. The last two presidents, a Republican and a Democrat, tried and failed to improve relations, if you will. What does Donald Trump see here that the others couldn't?
Well, I think firstly I would say that it's important to recognize with Vladimir Putin, he's not Mikhail Gorbachev. And you can't have a normal working relationship with a brutal tyrant like Vladimir Putin. And so the idea that we can get along well with the Russians, who are, of course, currently occupying a big part of Ukraine and also Georgia as well, causing a lot of mischief as well in the Middle East, supplying the Iranians with powerful missiles which will be used to shoot down potentially Israeli and U.S. aircraft. This is not a friendly regime, and so we have to recognize that Russia is an extremely dangerous adversary, as General Mattis pointed out in his hearings. And both Barack Obama and also George W. Bush attempted to build warmer ties with Putin. Both of them failed. And I think that we need to send a message of strength and resolve and determination to Moscow. And that includes not only keeping the sanctions in place that we have at the moment, but strengthening them and also reinforcing a U.S. military power in Europe, sending a very clear message to Moscow that any aggression against NATO allies will not be tolerated.
Well, now I suspect that's why President Trump was not just talking to President Putin today, but as you say, he's reaching out to these European leaders because you need to get some backing from European leaders to stay tough with Russia, having EU sanctions, European individual nations having sanctions against Russia as well. But there's a lot of speculation that President Trump may roll back some of the sanctions that President Obama put into place against Russia. Would you see that as a strategic mistake?
If indeed that is going to be the policy, and so far that there is no clear indication that that will be the policy, but if the US decides to go down that route, that would send completely the wrong signal to our allies, especially in Eastern and Central Europe, living in the shadow of the Russian bear. Those sanctions are very, very important in terms of weakening the Russian regime and sending a very clear signal that occupying other countries is not acceptable. Russia is trampling upon the sovereignty and self-determination of countries in Europe. It is directly menacing our very close friends in the Baltic states and Poland, for example, countries who have shed blood on the battlefield alongside US forces in recent years. So we need to stand with our allies. We need to maintain those sanctions against Russia and strengthen them. And also we need to tell Moscow very clearly that the United States stands with the NATO alliance, that the United States will defend its NATO partners in Europe.
Well, now, to your point about allies, there had been some on the left almost rooting for failure, it seemed, for President Trump in terms of his first meeting on the world stage, if you will, with Prime Minister May yesterday from Great Britain, and yet it seems like he came out of that with a head of steam, that the talks went well. They're talking about a U.S.-British trade deal in the months ahead. Talk about the strength of that alliance and how that may play into this equation.
Yes, I thought yesterday's meeting between President Trump and British Prime Minister Theresa May was very, very successful. It reinforced the importance of the Anglo-American special relationship. I think President Trump did very well. Theresa May did extremely well. And I think it sent a very clear signal that the US-UK special relationship is back after several years of President Obama weakening it. So I thought it was a very, very good day, actually, for the United States, also for Great Britain, and projecting some clear leadership on the world stage. And we do need the US and the UK leading together against a whole host of adversaries that we face today. So I thought a very, very good, successful meeting yesterday in Washington.
Now, last question. What about the relationship with Angela Merkel, the German chancellor? Donald Trump, not shy about anything, frankly, but in the campaign and in the transition, he had some tough words for Angela Merkel about her basically flip-flopping on the refugee issue that we see here. At first, she was very welcoming to refugees, and then as her own political standing has slipped a bit, as you know, in Germany, she's all of a sudden taking a tough stand, not quite like Donald Trump, but more along his lines than she was, say, 6 months ago. Talk about how important that relationship is as well.
Well, I think that President Trump was right, actually, to point out that Angela Merkel's refugee policy has been a complete disaster. It's been disastrous for Germany, it's disastrous for Europe. It has created huge security problems across the European continent. It's allowed in significant numbers of ISIS terrorists who have infiltrated the refugee flows. So I think it's very good that President Trump has been critical of Angela Merkel's handling of this. Of course, Germany is an important ally for the United States, but Merkel herself, I think, is a declining figure on the European stage. She's been eclipsed clearly by Theresa May this week. And I would hope that Germany adopts a tougher policy with regard to refugees, because the open borders approach that Angela Merkel has implemented has been absolutely catastrophic.
All right, Nile Gardiner, we really appreciate your insight today. A very busy day at the White House. You're offering our viewers a lot of analysis about some big issues in the days ahead for President Trump. Good to see you.
My pleasure. Thank you.